Well, it took 3 videos to talk about everything that was in chapter 6. We're going to try to do chapter 7 in just 2 videos. And I want to start by talking about a little bit of geography that might not have been clear up until now. In Jesus' day, the nation of Israel was divided into 3 main segments. The first would be the region of Galilee, which was all of the towns surrounding the Sea of Galilee up in the north. And that is where Jesus grew up with his parents in Nazareth. It's where he settled as an adult in the town of Capernaum on the water. It's where he turned the water into wine in Cana. It's where he taught on the hillside and multiplied the loaves and fishes and fed the 5,000 people in the previous chapter. It's where he walked on water. It's where many of his disciples were from. That was in the north. And then moving down, the next kind of major segment south would be the region of Samaria, which we talked about in chapter 4. And this is where a lot of people had settled who were only partly Jewish. They were of mixed race and mixed religion. They didn't worship at the temple in Jerusalem. And there was a lot of tension, racial tension and religious disagreement between them and those who consider themselves to be purely Jewish. And then moving south of there, you came to Judea, which is where the capital city, Jerusalem, was. It's where most of the population was. It's where the educated people were. It's also where Bethlehem was, the village where Jesus was born. And if you lived up in Galilee as Jesus did, then you would be very used to making the journey, which would be several days' walk to Judea to go up to Jerusalem. They called it going up to Jerusalem because Jerusalem was up on a hill. It was higher in elevation, and the law that Israel had received from God through Moses required that 3 times a year they go up to Jerusalem for certain religious festivals. And so his whole life, Jesus would have been making that journey several times a year. And that's what you see at the beginning of chapter 7. Chapter 7 says that Jesus was staying in Galilee, not going to Judea, because of the fact that he knew that the leaders were trying to kill him. One of the main things happening at this time in Jesus' ministry is that he's growing in popularity and he's becoming more and more of a divisive figure in the nation. There are a lot of people who are becoming convinced that he's someone special. He may be from God. He may be the Messiah. And then there are a lot of people becoming convinced that he's someone dangerous, that he might be leading people away from God. And so the question for them at this time is, who is this guy? And that's the question for us as well. You see that question come up in a couple of different ways in this chapter. First of all, at the beginning, Jesus' own brothers, who are not yet convinced that he's the Messiah, they challenge him to go up to the festival where the crowds are and to do miracles to prove who he is. Jesus is not interested in proving himself to them, so he doesn't go at their request, but then later he goes secretly. And you see in verses 10 through 12 that even before he gets there, he's what everyone is talking about. They are looking for him. They're debating whether he's a good man or a liar. And then when he gets there, he does begin to teach publicly, and the question is asked in a different way in verse 15. How did this man get such learning without having studied? They're saying he wasn't a disciple of any of our rabbis, but he knows so much about God. Who is this guy? And then Jesus makes the claim that his teaching comes from God, that he teaches to bring glory to God, and that, of course, offends his enemies. And then he takes it even further. He points out some of their hypocrisy because they are angry at him for healing someone on the Sabbath. That happened back in chapter 5. But they themselves will violate the Sabbath when they need to circumcise a young baby because they recognize that that requirement in the law supersedes the requirement about doing no work on the Sabbath. In other words, they will make an exception for themselves when they feel like it's appropriate. They won't make an exception for Jesus when he wants to bring hope and healing to someone on the Sabbath day. And so this debate of who is this guy? Is he from God or is he not? Is he leading people away from God? That debate's becoming more heated, and we're going to see the divide between those two groups continue to grow when we study the rest of chapter 7 in the next video.